Hello and welcome to WP Café episode number 20 with me, Keith Devon.
And with me, Mark Wilkinson. Hello, everyone.
Hello. How are you, Mark?
I am very well, very refreshed after a week away in the sunshine in Lanzarote, which was really nice.
Yeah,
I spent some
jealous.
time with the family and have a bit of rest, put the laptop away, which was good. Yeah, so it was good. What about you?
Did you have to do much work?
One or two crisis emails, but nothing. Nothing particularly.
Yeah,
which was good. Yeah,
come back to that in a minute, I think. But
yeah, we can do.
Yeah, I'm generally pretty well. Nothing major to report, I don't think. But yeah, it's been an all right week. Kind of a little bit bitty at the minute. Sort of in between major projects, aren't we?
Just what day is it? Wednesday.
Wednesday. Oh God, yeah,
it's Wednesday.
Today. So today we've got a few things to discuss. A couple of small bits, a couple of bigger bits. I would like to talk to people briefly about some visual regression testing that I've been doing, which has been really cool to get that set up.
That's exciting. That.
Yeah, it's going to be really good for us. I think it's a long time coming. So yeah, it's going to be really useful. We can talk about Delicious Brains, WP Engine, acquisitions, and then I think a little, maybe not so little, chat about the direction WordPress is going and how we've found it, maybe in the last couple of releases, and maybe a slight crisis of confidence or in the project and ourselves. I don't know, but lots to chat about around there. But anything else?
No, nothing else on my list. That was the main points of discussion, I think.
Swing back to last week. So we didn't do a podcast last week, did we? Because you were away.
We didn't, because I wasn't here.
And yeah, I just briefly wanted to talk about kind of what that's like. So we're a two-man team. One of us goes away, and it's kind of interesting for me. I think it's different for me when you go away than it is for you whenever I go away. Mainly because of Job Relay and how that's mostly your thing. So I really get a sense of the scale of your inbox whenever you go on all day, because everything gets routed through to me. Oh my God.
Please go away.
Is a pretty beautiful, quiet place these days because I unsubscribe from pretty much everything. Your inbox is not so quiet.
No, my inbox is very busy with Job Relay. I just get a lot of small emails, really, like support emails and things from the product, and people asking questions about it and things, which is fine. And obviously you got all those last week, and I think perhaps felt a bit overwhelmed and not know what to do with them all, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, frustrating, I think, is the maybe word I would use. Wasn't so overwhelmed by like the volume of it, but it was the fact that I wasn't able to help in most or not most cases, but in some cases when I felt like I should have been able to help. So it's something that we need to look at going forward. And it actually wasn't just on Job Relay side of things. So for example, I thought there was a problem with one of our deployment processes. So I'd pushed some code to one of our site repositories to fix a bug on a client site, and I didn't see it go through to the live site, and I thought it was a deployment issue. It turned out it wasn't. But I didn't know even where to go for that. I didn't know what we're using to deploy code and where I could go to check it and all that kind of stuff. So I think there's just a bigger question of processes and documentation. And I think you could go way too far with that stuff, but there's some kind of critical stuff that I think I need to know when you're not around, and potentially some stuff that you need to know when I'm not around. But
yeah, I think so. I think it's probably more when I'm away, I think, really. That makes me sound more important, but it's not the case at all.
No, but I know exactly what you mean, though. You've got the keys to more of the kind of mission critical stuff, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, definitely. Well, like things like with hosted sites as well, I guess that's similar in that sense. But Craig says, does it point for the need for documentation and process? And It does, yeah. I think you're right, definitely. But there's a balance, like Keith said. Like, one of the reasons why we like working together is that we don't need an awful lot of this stuff because, like, it's just the two of us. But definitely some things. We talked about some things earlier this week, actually, about what we can do and what we can just brief things that would actually help, which is good. So we'll definitely work on those, I think, which will help things out. And I think, like, when you're away, it's mainly people asking for, like, CSS tweaks, which is what I just don't touch front-endy CSS stuff at all. In fact, I could barely forgot how to write it, But I can usually get away with those. Like, even if I can't do it in, like, I haven't got, I don't even know what we use. Webpack, is it? Or no, Laravel Mix, is it? Or something like that. Anyway,
yeah, exactly. So that's changed recently. And
I don't even know. But I could just usually get away with, like, putting it in the customizer for, like, a few days until you get back. And I can probably make it work for the client if it's important.
Yeah.
And if it's not, then they can wait. So it's fine. So it's a little bit different, I think. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's tricky one, because we did try to when we were building a small team a few years ago, we did try to kind of start to document things a little bit more, and we had a little website. It was like a P2 thing or something like that.
Handbook,
yeah, a little kind of handbook. But it is. I mean, it's quite a lot of effort to create and maintain those. It's you've really got to be on it. When processes change, you have to update it. And so, like you said, we're small and agile, and it's one of the things I think that really works for us as a business, is that we don't have the baggage of loads and loads of processes and documentation, but sometimes it'll be very useful. So I think we just need to get the kind of critical stuff.
We talked about, like, just one page about job relay, didn't we? That would really help you, and I think that wouldn't take me long to write. So I will do that in the next few days, just to make sure that you've got something to go to, like, for troubleshooting, and to try and get some steps in place to help people out. Really, so it's good.
Yeah,
we will get that done.
Yep, cool. All right, so visual regression testing. So for those who don't know what that is, it's essentially comparing visual differences before and after a change. So, for example, you might take a bunch of screenshots of a few web pages or a single web page, make some changes to some CSS or some HTML or whatever, take another screenshot or a bunch of screenshots, and use some kind of tool to compare the two, the before and after state, and tell you if there's any difference between them. And what that allows you to do, whenever you automate that and you do it somewhat at scale, it allows you to have just a little bit more confidence in the changes that you make, especially on, like, a larger, kind of slightly more complex project. So if you're tweaking some kind of global CSS setting, and you're worried that, yes, it's going to fix the issue that you're working on right now, but you don't know what the kind of unintended side effects or consequences of that change are going to be. It lets you have a bit more confidence, because you can run these tests across the whole site, across potentially all the blocks on your site or all the modules. You can set it up to do that at all, like, different viewports, and you just kind of, like, type in a little command. I showed it to you yesterday, Mark, and it was super easy.
Yeah, it's really easy to do. I think this becomes more important when you're working with blocks and you've got, like, lots of combinations of the way blocks can appear on a page. So you make one change that works when there's a cover block above a media text block, but actually when there's a video above a media text block, it doesn't work as well. And therefore, having some sort of system where you can check as many of these combinations as you can. I mean, you're never going to check them all out, because there's literally thousands of combinations of blocks. But that works. That's where it's really kicked in for us, I think. Whereas I think when you don't use block-based sites to build sites, you've got set patterns. So you know that this content's following this content and following this content on these pages, rather than having a mix of things. So I think that's what's really been important. But yeah, you set it up yesterday and showed me, and it was good. It was really easy, which was nice.
Yeah, would have been useful for us recently with the updates to 5.9 and 6, because I think we would have caught a few of the issues that weren't, like, really immediately obvious when you did a quick scan through the sites. But yeah, so what I did is I'd set this up a little while ago using a tool called Percy. Percy's been, looks like, acquired by Browser Stack, so they've kind of integrated it into their processes. But
we had
Michael
I tried to get channel, that, didn't we? Who did some demonstrations of it, which is good. But I think for me, it seemed very complicated to do. And if you're a part of a big team doing big projects, then it's probably worth investing the time to do it. But I just think at that point, we didn't really feel like we could.
Yeah, and it was hooked up to like a continuous integration kind of process, using like pull requests and things like that. It was really cool. It was Michael Blank that showed us that stuff. But so I went back to Percy to try to get that working again. Failed for some reason. I think they've changed something about their local kind of setup.
Okay.
So I just did a quick like Google search around to see what I could find, and I saw someone discussing backstopjs. So I thought I'll give backstopjs a go. Loaded up their website. It's a GitHub. Oh, have I got the URL handy? That would be good, wouldn't it? I'll tell you what though. I did a video about this yesterday, like a little 10-minute tutorial video, which is going to be published later today. So if anyone wants to actually see the process of setting it up, it'll be there. It's got all the URLs and everything in it. But yeah, so I just went to the website, ran a npm install this thing, npm backstop init, or just backstop init actually, and then it's kind of configure a JSON file, which is fairly straightforward. And actually, there's lots of commands in there, arguments in there that you don't really need. So at its most simple, it is very, very simple. You put you set up your breakpoints, you set up the pages that you want to test, whether they're local pages or live web pages. You type in backstop. What's the first command?
Reference. Backstop
reference, and then that sets up the original screenshots. Then you make your changes, and then you do backstop test. It takes another bunch of screenshots, and then it opens in your browser a really nice, simple user interface to kind of compare the two, and it says which ones have failed, which ones have passed, and you can see why they failed. Really, really great. But like I said, a video coming out on this very channel later on today.
So if you're not subscribed, you can subscribe now and hit the bell, and then you'll get a notification when it does come out.
Okay. Always on it, Mark. Like it. Putting the mark into marketing. All right. Well, before we get to our maybe biggest topic, kind of talking about the recent changes to WordPress, the delicious brains plugin sell-off. What did you make of that news?
I was quite surprised, actually. It's one of those acquisitions where some of them you sort of, I don't know, you just think, that was in the pipeline, or you thought that might happen. But I didn't think that would happen with Delicious Brains. I didn't think they'd actually do that. I mean, I can understand why you do it, reading what they've said about it. But it was a surprise, considering as well that they've just acquired. I say just, it's probably about 12 months ago, isn't it? Just acquired Advanced Custom Fields.
It was a year ago.
Yeah. To then obviously to then offload those to WP Engine, but yeah, good for them. I mean, if it's the right decision, then great. I hope that those plugins will continue to be looked after, and customers will continue to see them as the gold standard in those areas, which they seem to be at the moment.
So I've got reservations.
Well,
it's hard to put my finger on it, on all of them, really. One of them, I think, is like this sense of power within the industry being condensed is the wrong word. I can't remember what the right word is, but into just a few very powerful organizations rather than distributed across more independent organizations. So there's potentially like less voices. If all the plugins eventually are owned by either WP Engine or Awesome Motive or whoever the rest of them are, that can't be a healthy ecosystem. Surely, I don't know. That doesn't feel healthy to me. It feels inevitable, but it doesn't necessarily.
I was going to say inevitable. I guess that's the wrong word. It's not inevitable. It doesn't have to happen. Like, you don't have to sell your plugins to the big players, but it does seem that happens in industries. You know, it ends up with like 5 or 6 big players, and they just have everything almost.
Yeah, as any kind of industry or marketplace matures, exactly. This is what happens.
And is that not what's happening here? Just the
same?
Yes,
it is. Whether that's a good thing or not. So that's one reservation. I just feel like I like that there's independent voices. It's it's the same reason that I don't like automatic acquiring good teams and good people, because I like those voices that can stand up to automatic when it needs to happen. When we need voices in the community that are like, actually, I'm not happy with the direction of this or that. They become less and less. Is WP Engine really going to kick up a massive stink at any point against automatic? Probably not. But would Pippin have done that? Possibly. Would Delicious Brains have done that? Possibly. And they would have had enough power to be heard, but not so much that they're kind of in the pocket of the master, if that makes sense. I don't know.
But you could argue that WP Engine have got far more power to kick up a stink if they wanted to than everyone else would have on their own. So I suppose you could turn that around and say that's a good thing in a way. But I don't know.
So second concern, and it actually mirrors what Craig is saying here.
Yeah.
Thanks for the comments, by the way, Craig. He's a Genesis user, and he says that the development of the Genesis framework has stagnated since Studio Press was acquired. So this is another thing. Like the teams behind those Delicious Brain plugins, they're probably quite passionate about those plugins, and that's their thing. And now they're being handed off to a big company who it's just one of many small revenue streams. So are they actually incentivized to make that thing great? Like WP Engine is a huge, huge company. Their revenues are massive. Like Migrate DB Pro means nothing to them. Is it even called that? Migrate Pro or something? I can't remember. It got renamed. It just doesn't mean anything to them from a revenue point of view.
So why buy it then?
I'm not sure.
Surely,
I think it's to control those tools so that they can provide and like hone those tools to provide like a unified like developer experience, a unified WordPress experience. I don't know though. That's
if that is the case, you would still want to make them good tools, and you want to make sure they're still good tools and look after them. And like for example, with what Craig was saying with the Genesis framework, if you wanted to be or build the best WordPress theme framework, then I can understand why you might want to say, well, I want to buy the Genesis framework because currently that's the market leader. So we want to sort of get that off the market. But they haven't made their own, and they haven't made one that's better or continued that one. So I don't understand, in that aspect, why that's been done. I could understand if they want to make it better and then own it. But that was like from what Craig's saying, that's not what's happened. It's got worse.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And I guess one of my other long-term worries is that eventually some of these tools will be siloed off, and you have to be a WP Engine customer to use X or Y. I do see that coming in the future.
Yeah, I think that's
so they'll package everything up as a kind of Jetpack style thing, and you have to be a customer of that to get access to all these tools. So I can see that in the future. My final
just to come in on that, the beauty of open source is that they could stop that happening. People could stop that happening now. Someone else could take the Genesis framework now and start and make it available to everyone forever.
Yeah.
If that's what they wanted to do, they can't really. It's open source software with an open source license. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, but they can't really suddenly say they could fork it, but then they have to honor that license, don't they?
Yeah.
You can create whatever you want from it, but you have to have the same license as what the original had. That's
I see
the open source license. Yep. So they could make it more difficult to use those products, but I don't think they can actually take them away from people, I think, with the open source model of them.
Yeah. My last concern with these acquisitions, I think, is for the employees of the companies that have been acquired. So I'm, a developer. Brad has come to me and said, "Do you want to come and work at my company?" You're like, Delicious Brains? Hell yeah, I want to work for Delicious Brains. Like, they build all the stuff that I love. Yep. It's a really cool team. Oh, a year later, by the way, you're now a WP Engine employee. Is everyone happy with that? Honestly, I don't know. I don't think I would be. I got offered a job years and years and years and years ago at an agency, a WordPress agency, and I didn't take it. And like 3 months later, they were acquired by Automatic. And the owner of the agency said to me once, "Oh, that must be one of the worst decisions you ever made, Keith. You could have been working with us at Automatic." I was like, "It's one of the best decisions I ever made." I would have left the freedom I had as a freelancer to go and work for your awesome team for 3 months, and then I've been working for this huge company that I have no interest in working for. Anyway,
surely to counter that, in that instance, in that example, you wouldn't have had to go for Automatic.
No, but I could have basically shut down my freelancing career. All of my, I could have got rid of all of my clients to you and other freelancers at that point. And then where am I?
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with you, but I also think that you never know what's coming down the line, No. And can the business owner make a decision on something because they hired Bob last week? That's a difficult one.
Yeah, it is, and I'll definitely give the people involved in this particular story the benefit of the doubt here that they didn't know back then that this was going to happen, and it seemed to be from Brad's post that it was not a spontaneous decision, but something that hadn't been planned whenever you acquired ACF, for example.
Yeah.
So I'll definitely give them the benefit of the doubt, and I am very happy for people like Brad and for the people in the team that are happy with this acquisition and for WP Engine, and there's great people involved through this whole process that have done well out of this deal, who I'm very happy for. But I just as a mechanism within the industry, I'm always a bit reserved by celebrating acquisitions. I'm always just there's always another side to this story, or many other sides. So anyway,
and that's because we never really find out why WP Engine have bought it. Is it purely because actually the Delicious Brains plugin are a massive money-making opportunity, and therefore we'll spend X amount of money to capture that money-making opportunity? And the great plugins, that might be the answer,
Yeah.
Or is it something else? We don't know. We'll never know, will we?
No, we don't. Yeah, we don't know the buying motives. We don't know the selling motives. Yeah. Well, we've got an idea of the selling motive. But there you go. Yeah, interesting. Interesting one. There's been lots said and lots written about it, I think. But at the end of the day, we don't really know what's going on and why. And yeah, like I say, give people the benefit of the doubt, I think.
For sure. Yeah. So moving on
to our final topic of the day.
What are we calling this topic? I don't really know.
Existential crisis in WordPress, part 53.
It feels like we have one every 4 weeks.
No, it's a bit longer than that.
Maybe a bit longer than that.
I think the cycle is more like 4 months at the minute.
Every WordPress release.
Yeah.
This one felt a bit bigger though. I don't know. I just felt like a really down moment,
It did for me.
Some are like, "Oh, that's a pain," but it's not that bad, But this one was a bigger one. So what was it?
Well, it crept up on us a little bit, and I think it must have happened with the release of 5.9. Actually,
5.9 had some issues for us, didn't it?
Yeah. So we had issues, and I think that's when we started to notice all of these container classes starting to appear.
That's right. 5.9. Yeah.
So this is
weren't they removed? I think the container. One or the other. They were either added in. Didn't groups have an inner container and then they were removed?
No, I mean the container classes, not the container divs.
Right. Sorry.
Container divs were removed before that.
Right.
Which was a pain, but actually...
Which was another thing.
potentially. I don't. That actually felt like progress because you're removing markup that's potentially unnecessary.
Okay.
So I could get behind that. It was annoying, but I could get behind that. Now, what I'm talking about is the rendered CSS styles per block. So,
for example,
your page now there'll be style tags, loads and loads of style tags, one for each group or column or cover block on the page, with a bunch of styles, very, very specific to that block. We talked about this on the last episode.
Yeah. Briefly. So they're essentially got classes like WP-container-random number.
And so it's like an ID.
Yeah. And a lot of them are actually just complete repeats, aren't they? So like
they're practically
ID 29 will be the same as ID 49, for example. They're just completely the same.
Yeah, exactly. And the bizarre thing about this is that even if you haven't set any options on a block, these will be created. So I can create a columns block, not change any of the default settings, and it will still output these styles. So you could have 20 columns blocks on a page, and you'll have 20 style tags with exactly the same CSS in them.
The same rules.
The same rules.
Yeah. So instead of applying those same rules to all those column blocks, you've got 20 different rules that are applying the same rules to each block.
Yeah. So
seems crazy to me.
Craziness. I do not understand it. So there was that, okay? And then I don't know if this was a sex change.
What's difficult for us to understand is why. Why are they doing that? I genuinely can't come up with an advantage of that.
But what it looks like they were doing, is moving away from utility classes on blocks completely. So
utility classes being, for example,
I can't remember exactly, but something along the lines of is vertically aligned or whatever. It's like something that tells you not the style of a block, but the kind of layout options. So for a column, it could be a vertically aligned top, vertically aligned center, vertically aligned bottom, or something like that. Yeah. So that used to be output as a utility class on the block itself. So it meant as a theme author, I have access to that. If I want to use the Gutenberg styles, I could augment those styles by doing something like, do you know what? If you select vertically aligned bottom, actually we change this block in other ways. It's not just that we're changing the vertical alignment bottom. We could do something else, like add another CSS rule to that class. What they've done though is just remove those classes completely. So it seems that they want to be putting all of the block-specific CSS, like layout-specific CSS, into these generated style tags, which for me as a theme author is just like the worst news ever. It's just terrible. It's the exact opposite of how I feel CSS should work, and like kind of what I believe in, like the principles of CSS and why it was created in the first place. It feels to me like we're going back in time towards something approaching Dreamweaver.
Like Mark says here, says this is the sort of code that page builders tend to generate, which is why I avoid them.
There you go. Yeah.
Which is kind of the truth. But I think still for me, sat here now, like I still can't understand why. Why do it that way? And it actually, there's two aspects to that. Why change it? So why output these silly rules that are just duplicated constantly on the page? So there's that issue. I'm sure there's a reason. Surely there's a reason why this has been done. But if you're going to do that, then why not just keep the classes there as well, and then people can use them, so that they can use them to do what they want. You don't have to do anything with them, but just put them on the block, because otherwise you literally can't target the block.
This is the thing. There has been a decision made at some point to remove those classes. Like, why?
Why?
I just don't. It's just
finding that conversation. Well, it's impossible. We've looked, haven't we, yesterday for like I don't know, an hour. We couldn't find anything about why they were removed. We found an interesting GitHub issue where one of the lead developers of Gutenberg was kind of saying it seems to be a mistake and it will be reverted. But then, like, why on earth has it been released? This was before the release of 6, wasn't it?
Yeah. So this is Matthias.
Comment. Yeah, that comment was before the release of version 6. It seems to indicate that we want to go back to using classes, which is great. But it seems to be that that's been released. Just seems very bizarre to me.
Yeah, so I think what Matthias said there, he basically said exactly, like, I agreed with everything he said in that comment. So he said that we need the utility classes. That makes sense to have those. But if for example, in a column block, you can set the width. So you can set it by like pixels or ems or whatever.
Yep.
So I can set a column to 52 pixels wide if I wanted to. There's no way you could create a utility class for that. So for those, you do need to render some CSS rules on the page. That's fine. But for just general align top, align center, align bottom, and things of that nature, it just seems absolutely bizarre to me not to use classes. Just craziness.
I completely agree.
So yeah, it just made us think, like, really, what is this project becoming? If it worries me that it's going in that direction anyway. But what worries me, almost even more, is seeing Matthias's comment and knowing that still didn't get fixed. It just feels, how are we pushing out a major release with something that, to me anyway, and it looks like to the lead developer, feels so broken? Like, surely there's a problem with the process there.
Yeah.
And it worries me. And we're feeling the effects of this, the direct effects. Our clients are feeling them. We're feeling them. Like, we're getting emails now saying, this is broken, that's broken, this thing's broken. We're like, yeah, because they just keep changing things all the time. The markup changes, the class, the layout classes changes, the CSS changes. It's just,
for me, that's another big one. Like, just changing the markup of blocks completely. We've had that yesterday with the client, didn't we, with the cover block?
Yeah.
So the overlay used to be on the block div, and now they've stuck it in a span before the image, the cover block. So it just, I mean, in this instance, it doesn't break. Obviously, the overlay doesn't work. But it's just like changing the markup of a block. To me, that's a massive decision. It's going to affect lots of sites.
Yeah.
And I know they will have mitigations in place for that. So I assume in the block, the Gutenberg block style sheet that gets loaded on the front end, they've got something in there that sort of fixes the fact that the markup's changed. But if you're not running, if you're not using that, which is perfectly, allowed to do, then it's not going to work. It's going to break.
If you are running that, Mark, you may have other custom styles relying on the markup structure that was there before.
Correct.
Yeah.
And we ended up chatting yesterday, I think, like, what we need like a mailing list here that says, like, this is a breaking, like, WordPress never introduced breaking changes. It was one of those things that you could update and everything would just work. It'd be backwards compatible and so forth. Yeah. But these things, and I know they're slightly different to that, but they are fundamental breaking changes that are actually breaking websites. And we need to know about them in advance. Like, and you were saying, like, I hadn't even heard of these changes to the cover block. And I know you could argue that's us not keeping up to date, but it actually is really hard. You kind of want a mailing list that's specifically for, right, we're going to make this change in 2 months' time, and this is going to change, and it's likely to break. And I can get an email in my inbox that says, right, I need to deal with it.
Yeah, do you know what? It's very easy for us to sit here being frustrated. I want to understand. Like, I would love someone, and maybe they've done it somewhere, but again, this is kind of part of the problem. I would love someone to say, this is why we're doing it this way, and these are the pros, these are the cons, this is why we made the decision. It'll be there somewhere. It'll be on a GitHub issue. Yeah. It'll be in Slack somewhere. It'll be on a Make blog. I don't know where it'll be, but it'll be somewhere. Like, this conversation did take place.
That led to another conversation between me and you. It's like, I just can't keep up. Like, I can't follow Slack, and there's so many different places to look. You've got GitHub issues, you've got Make blog, you've got Slack conversations. and my brain isn't capable of keeping up with all that. So that's why I miss things. I don't know if there's a better way, but I appreciate it's a distributed project. It's very difficult to do, and everyone's doing the best at it. But for me, that's just really difficult to keep up with it.
So if anyone is listening or watching and they know why, and they can defend this, I would genuinely love to hear it. Before we sign off for the day, there's a few comments that I'd like to just bring up, and then one question from Sam. If anyone else has any questions, please get them in, and we'll try to do them just before we close up today.
I think, sorry, just before you do that, Keith, I think it's probably worth mentioning that if you're listening to this as a podcast, by the way, this was live on YouTube when we recorded it. So if you're wondering where these questions are coming from, they were actually live on the YouTube broadcast, which you might consider watching next time. But if you are listening on the podcast, then you can always tweet either myself or Keith or even the WP Cafe show Twitter, and we'll do our best to answer them.
Yeah, I'd love to actually take questions during the week and then answer them every show. That'd be really cool. Yeah. Okay, first from Tony Gerling. He says duplicate classes - lazy coding might as well implement with inline styles. I think this is a rushed interim implementation. So I think Tony's agreeing with us there that this is all a bit crazy and seems a bit rushed and not very well thought through. Craig says, thanks again, Craig, for all your questions and comments today. Very hard to confidently build against something that's changing with every release. Could not agree more.
Yeah, definitely.
Sam Berry says, Gutenberg seems so focused chasing Wix and Squarespace. Sorry. Developers are a secondary requirement. I can't use native blocks because these native blocks change so often. Interesting, and we'll come back to that in just a moment because Sam actually asks a question about that. Are they chasing Wix and Squarespace? It feels like it, and for me that's weird because WordPress was the one with the massive market share, so why are we chasing them? Anyway, Bjorn Oldrup, the inline duplicate styling reminds me of Divi. Yep, agreed. Yep. And other page builders years ago. And he also says that Oxygen and even Divi now allows for class-based styling. They call it presets, I think. Wow, class-based styling? How futuristic. Like, who would have thought? So back to just to cover a couple of questions. Sam says, when creating a theme, how many native blocks do you use?
So our philosophy is to use as many as possible, actually. And actually, you can do an awful lot with the native blocks as you can. And if you haven't investigated block patterns and block variations, that allows you to do stuff with block groups of blocks that have specific classes. So the client doesn't need to add those themselves, and they can then do different things with native blocks. Mm-hmm. So we use a lot. Is the answer to that question. We obviously build custom blocks for clients who have specific requirements. The most obvious custom block that we have for pretty much every client is some sort of, well, I think we call it a content listing block, which is essentially show me 5 posts from the such a post type. The recent
it's
ones.
Essentially the query block, isn't it?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's that one. What examples of other blocks we've built? I can't remember. We build the odd custom block that people need. Testimonials we've built, like where you can pull testimonials in from a post type rather than typing them in every time. That sort of thing. But yeah, quite a lot. Native blocks is what we try and go for.
Absolutely.
Which is why we're seeing some of the issues we are, because we've got native blocks that have changed.
Yeah. And then finally, Dylan P. Thanks for the question, Dylan. Going forward, what are your guys' thoughts for building new sites for clients? Are you sticking with WordPress or looking for other things?
So that is a really interesting question, because for the first time, I think, this week, I've genuinely thought about what else is out there. A lot of the time beforehand, it's been like, oh, I wonder what's out there, and then never really sort of like pursuing it as such. But some of the comments I had on Twitter was that there are actually lots of good stuff out there. In reality, that's probably not going to happen yet. because WordPress still gives me, 95% of the goodness that I want to give to clients. It's something we know and love. And actually going out and learning something new in the long run might be an awesome idea, but in the here and now, it's just really difficult to do. So certainly not off the radar, but we'll still be building with WordPress for the foreseeable future, I think, anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting for us because we're definitely positioned as WordPress developers. Like we win work because people want a WordPress website and they want to work with experienced WordPress developers. So to suddenly start using Statamic or Craft or something like that is going to be very difficult from a kind of business point of view, from a marketing point of view. But we are probably about to reposition ourselves slightly anyway into a niche industry, and actually leaning into an industry takes the pressure a little bit off the technology we're going to use. So we could just become recruitment website specialists, and actually nobody cares what we build it on. We just build great sites. I know it happens to be WordPress, or it happens to be Squarespace, or whatever, any of these tools, Statamic or Craft or whatever. So that could be an opportunity for us, like further down the line, to actually gradually reduce the amount that we kind of lean on WordPress in our marketing, and actually just say, we just build great websites. Don't you worry about what it's built on, kind of thing. So, yeah,
for sure. Yeah.
Great.
Right. Any last questions in that list?
There were not, I don't think.
Good.
There was another comment.
All right, I see. Oh, there we go, yeah.
Yeah, I'll just stick Sam's up again. See, he says, interesting, using native blocks for theme development. It got too confusing for the clients. I ended up nesting too many groups with utility classes. Reusable blocks helps to solve this, but isn't perfect. Yeah, we don't actually use reusable blocks very often, which is interesting.
Not very often, no. They're very awkwardly named, I think, reusable blocks. Clients don't really understand them. I think to your point there, Sam, you are correct. It can get very confusing, but actually, it's never perfect, don't get me wrong. But once clients get using them, they learn how to use them better than you probably think. So we found that with a lot of our clients. When they first do things, they've got groups inside groups and then columns inside columns and things like that. And then they gradually realize with education how to do it. So my advice would be persevere, stick with it, educate clients, don't get annoyed with them when they do things wrong, and really work with them, because they will get it in the end. And it's probably of a benefit to everyone if they do.
Great. Think we should wrap up?
Yep, for sure.
Thanks for joining us today. Thanks for everyone who joined us live. Thanks for listening on the podcast whenever this goes out in the podcast. Like we said, if you've got any questions for us, we'd love to hear them on Twitter. I'm at Keith Devon. Mark is at WP Mark. Or you can tweet to the show itself, which is at WP Café show. Yeah, we'd always appreciate likes and subscribes if you feel inclined. And looking forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for joining us.
This is going to be a weekly thing, is the plan. So if you want to get a notification of that, then hit the bell icon, because I think that makes you gets you into your feed straight away. I think is that the plan. So do that. But anyway, other than that, we'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.